The morning mist clung to the mountains like a soft gray blanket as Sarah stepped onto the wooden deck of the mountain hostel. She wrapped her hands around her steaming coffee mug, breathing in the crisp alpine air that filled her lungs with something close to peace. This was exactly what she had needed after 6 months of endless meetings, ringing phones, and the suffocating weight of expectations in her corporate job back in Denver. The hostel sat perched on a ridge in the Colorado Rockies, a rustic haven for backpackers and travelers seeking refuge from the world below. Sarah had stumbled upon it 3 days ago, exhausted from hiking the Continental Divide Trail, and had decided to extend her stay. There was something healing about this place, something that made her shoulders finally relax for the first time in years. She wasn't the only long-term guest. There was Michael, the quiet guy who had arrived the same day she did. He kept to himself mostly, always carrying a worn leather journal and sitting by the large stone fireplace in the evenings, writing or sketching. Sarah had tried to engage him in conversation a few times, but he seemed content with polite nods and brief exchanges about the weather or the hiking trails. Michael intrigued her, though she couldn't quite put her finger on why. He didn't fit the typical backpacker mold. His gear was high quality but understated, and there was something in the way he carried himself that suggested depths beneath the surface. His dark hair was always slightly tousled, as if he'd just run his fingers through it, and his eyes held a distant quality that made Sarah wonder what he was thinking about during those long, quiet moments by the fire. The other guests came and went, but Sarah and Michael had settled into a comfortable routine of shared silence. She would read her book on the deck while he sketched in his journal nearby. They would nod at each other during meals, exchange brief comments about the mountain views, and retreat to their respective corners of solitude. On her 4th morning at the hostel, Sarah woke to find a note slipped under her door. The handwriting was careful and deliberate. "There's something I'd like to show you, if you're willing to trust a stranger. Meet me on the North Trail at 10, Michael." Sarah stared at the note for a long moment, her coffee growing cold in her hands. Part of her hesitated. She had come here to be alone, to figure out what came next in her life after walking away from everything she had built in the city. But there was something about Michael's quiet presence that had become oddly comforting over the past few days. She found herself getting dressed in her hiking clothes, curiosity winning over caution. The North Trail was a narrow path that wound through dense pine trees, dappled with morning sunlight. Sarah arrived to find Michael waiting for her, but he seemed different somehow. There was an energy about him that she hadn't noticed before, an alertness that replaced his usual contemplative calm. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice warmer than she had ever heard it. "I know I've been distant, but I wanted to share something with you before I leave tomorrow." Sarah felt a small pang of disappointment at the mention of his departure, which surprised her. "You're leaving?" "I have to get back to work," Michael said, gesturing for her to follow him up the trail. "But first, I wanted to show you why I really came here." They walked in comfortable silence for about 20 minutes, the trail gradually opening up as they climbed higher. The trees began to thin, revealing sweeping views of the valley below. Sarah was about to ask where they were going when she heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping sound that grew steadily louder. She looked up to see a helicopter cresting the ridge, its rotors cutting through the mountain air with practiced precision. Sarah stopped walking, her mouth falling open as the aircraft circled once before, settling down in a small clearing just ahead of them. That's for us?" Sarah asked, having to raise her voice over the sound of the rotors winding down. Michael nodded, a shy smile spreading across his face. "I wanted to show you the mountains the way I see them." As they approached the helicopter, Sarah noticed the pilot giving Michael a respectful nod. This wasn't a tourist operation, this was something else entirely. Michael helped her into the passenger seat with the practiced ease of someone who had done this many times before. "What do you do, Michael?" Sarah asked as he settled into the seat beside her, putting on a headset and gesturing for her to do the same. "I'm a search and rescue pilot," he said through the headset, his voice clear now despite the noise around them. "I've been covering this region for 8 years, but I've been, struggling lately. Lost a hiker last month. Someone about your age, actually. She was experienced, well prepared, but the weather turned and we couldn't reach her in time. Asterisk the helicopter lifted off smoothly, and Sarah felt her stomach drop as the ground fell away beneath them. But as they rose above the tree line, the sensation of falling was replaced by something magnificent. The mountains spread out below them like a vast tapestry of green and gray and white. More beautiful than anything she had ever seen. Asterisk, I came here to decide if I could keep doing this job. Michael continued, his voice quiet even through the headset. Every time I go up now, I think about the people I couldn't save. But watching you these past few days, seeing how the mountains helped you find some peace, it reminded me why I started doing this work in the first place. Asterisk Sarah looked over at him, seeing him clearly for the first time. The quiet intensity she had noticed made sense now. This was someone who carried the weight of other people's lives in his hands. Someone who had dedicated himself to being there when everything went wrong for others. Asterisk, you save people, she said simply. Asterisk, I try to, Michael replied. But sometimes the mountains take them anyway. Asterisk, they flew in silence for a while, soaring over peaks that Sarah had only seen from below. The world looked different from up here, vast and interconnected, with patterns and relationships that were invisible from the ground. She understood now why Michael had seemed so distant, so contemplative. He saw the world from this perspective, regularly, saw how small and fragile human lives were against the backdrop of these ancient mountains. Asterisk, why did you bring me up here? Sarah asked as they began to circle back toward the hostel. Asterisk, Michael was quiet for a long moment, because he reminded me that the mountains aren't just a place where people get lost. They're also a place where people find themselves. I'd forgotten that. Asterisk, as they descended toward the landing area, Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. She had come to the mountains to escape, to figure out what to do with her life after walking away from everything that had defined her. But maybe running away wasn't the answer. Maybe the answer was finding something worth running toward. Asterisk, the helicopter touched down gently, and as the rotors began to slow, Sarah turned to Michael. Will you keep flying? Asterisk, he nodded, his eyes meeting hers with a clarity that hadn't been there before. Yeah, I think I will. Someone has to be up there watching out for the people who need help finding their way. Asterisk, as they walked back down the trail together, Sarah realized that she had found her answer too. Not in solitude or escape, but in the quiet courage of someone who had chosen to spend his life lifting others up when they needed it most. Sometimes the most important conversations happened without words, and sometimes the people who changed your life were the ones who said the least. Asterisk, the next morning, Sarah woke early to say goodbye to Michael. She found him on the deck, journal in hand, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and pink. Asterisk, thank you, she said, settling into the chair beside him. Asterisk, for what? Asterisk, for reminding me that there are still people in the world who choose to help rather than take. Asterisk, Michael smiled, closing his journal. What will you do now? Asterisk, Sarah looked out at the mountains, feeling something like hope stirring in her chest. I think I'll go back to the city, but differently this time. Maybe find work that matters. Asterisk, as Michael's ride arrived to take him back to his helicopter and his life of watching over others, Sarah remained on the deck. She had come to the mountains as one person and would leave as another, not because she had run away from her problems, but because she had learned that the most profound changes often came from the quietest moments, shared with the most unexpected people. Asterisk, the mountains would always be here, patient and eternal, offering their lessons to anyone willing to listen. And somewhere above them, Michael would be flying, ready to reach down and lift up anyone who had lost their way.